Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the New to Wrestling podcast, After Dark. This week, we're getting into Season 3, Episode 14 of Dark Side of the Ring on Hulu. This is the podcast where we like to gossip about old wrestling tea, new wrestling tea. We really get into it all. But this week, we're focusing on the steroid trials. Girl, a ride.
A
A
ride.
ride. I
There's
once
so
again
much happening.
want to shout out Vice for their
Oh,
work, for
amen.
the way they do what they do. Wow. Because this was combined my two biggest fears, which is the ultra rich who think they're untouchable, and then the government.
And like government
Like,
overreach. Like
yes,
it's
government
like
overreach into ultra wealthy untouchable is like it's like my Godzilla versus Mothra. Like, really, it's so scary.
That's amazing. That is the
Biggest
best way I've
fears
ever heard
colliding. Yeah, like this is one of those amazing, in like a not like wow stunning way, like in a terrifying amazing way,
that.
where it's like you just don't even know which side is worse,
Right.
and like you are left with more questions than answers. Like, it was just
Fully.
a good episode. I watched it twice, like, because there was so much happening, there was such a cast of characters. Like, I don't know, first
Oh,
impressions, thoughts.
gag. Well, I knew I had some semblance that this happened. Like I had an idea that this happened, but I had no idea how every top person in the company was just involved. I had no idea.
Everyone.
No. And the fact that they had to go up on trial and testify against or for their boss is nutty. Is
On a
absolutely insane.
federal level.
Right.
Like, that is crazy to me.
It is the US government putting the screws to you.
Wow. And I think that also there's so many things, because Xavier and I were like texting about this because it was such a crazy episode. Like, normally we save the goss for like when we get into the
Oh
show,
yeah,
but I
we
was like, there
very
was
much
so
so.
much.
We approach it
We get to
Regis
text.
and Kelly, where we
Yeah,
just
so
don't
much.
talk.
Fully. Yeah, we do not speak because then it's just like live reactions. But we did like chit chat a little bit like over text and yesterday when we recorded our other episode this week. But God, just so much. So
Absolute
much. But
insanity.
what got me was also the fact that it wasn't just the wrestlers doing steroids. Like you said, it was like everyone was.
Oh no, everybody. Everybody.
CEOs,
Everybody.
trainers,
Mm-hmm.
like they called it candy. Like,
Yeah,
candy.
literally that. Yeah, they're like, if you needed candy, he's got them, and you're like,
Yep.
candy. And it's nuts that it was just it it was perfectly legal activity until it wasn't.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. So yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I feel like before we really get into like the back and forth, I think it's important to remember that like what Vince's side and what his lawyer believed was happening was that the federal government was like basically looking for like a sensationalized circus trial to enforce the fact that they'd passed a new law in 1990, um making anabolic steroids a controlled substance.
Right.
And like basically the lawyer believed that the federal government was just coming after the WWF as fall people to like enforce that this was a new law and make an example of somebody. So
Right.
that's like their perspective, but the other side is like, but everyone is doing steroids in the WWE.
Right.
So it's not like on unfounded grounds. Like, that's why it's so interesting, because it's like
Right.
both sides are crazy.
Right. You get it to an extent from both areas. Yes,
Yes.
technically what they were doing was legal at the time, I guess. But the laws change all the time.
All the time.
You used to be able to drink and drive, and that was totally valid and chill until it wasn't. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's laws do change, and you do have to adhere to them, obviously.
Duh.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, it did feel like the US government just wanted a scapegoat to be like, hey, this is what happens when you defy this law. And it's
like you guys need to shape up, because
right.
like doesn't matter how new the law is, like you guys need to like fall in line.
Right.
It is so interesting, especially with, like, drug laws, like, the way because people can, like, they have addictions, they have problems, like and, like, to just, like, switch up the law, like, crazy. Anyway, that's a
Right. Right,
whole
right,
other
right.
thing, but, let's get into this episode.
Okay, let's do it.
So, I before like, let's, like, just introduce we had a crazy cast of characters and, like, let's just
Yes.
go down the line so that we all are informed of who are the main players. Obviously, we have Vince McMahon, we are introduced in the very beginning to his lawyer, Jerry McDivitt Esquire. He has represented the WWE for 30 years and apparently is continuing to do so because, Xavier just told me that he had represented Vince in a lawsuit literally last year,
Yeah.
almost exactly a year ago.
So it is our assumption. We don't know. I haven't found the answer for sure that this will also be the lawyer for his current ongoing sexual assault slash trafficking case. So I
So yeah,
imagine because this man has like defended the WWE through like one, the steroid trials, the whole fiasco that was the double homicide suicide with Chris Benoit, Owen Hart's tragic death, where he falls like during a pay-per-view from like a really ridiculous height, causing his death, and then this ridiculously like high profile steroid case. So he is, as far as like, he has seen the WWE's slash Vince's like darkest hours and has like
yeah.
been the person to try and like navigate them through it.
hmm
So he's a main player in this whole
He is
scenario.
like the player. Like it's
Right,
so fascinating. But yes, I we were discussing and guys like let us know what you think. Like I really feel like he must be the one that's going to represent Vince. Like he has to be
right.
because who else
Who
really?
else?
Especially
And
after you see this episode, like you're gonna be like
right.
has to be that
No,
guy.
100%. Because at the end there is this like moment where he's just like we are like ride or die. Like
They like our
he
bond is they were like how would you describe
unbreakable.
your friendship and he goes unbreakable.
Yeah, he
Like
literally.
girl,
I was like, all right, he must be paying you.
girl,
Listen, we all know what
so
lawyers are
crazy.
here for.
That's what I'm saying. So we have that's Jerry McDivitt. We have Wade Keller, who is the editor of Pro Wrestling Torch. He was on site for the whole trial. Like he was there for every single day. I guess Pro Wrestling Torch was like a radio show or a newspaper or something.
Beats
It
me.
was basically everyone here is like a journalist. We have
Right.
Dave Meltzer, editor and publisher of the Wrestling Observer newsletter.
Still
Um,
kicking, still around,
Still
still doing his
around,
thing.
yeah. We have John Arezzi, who is the host of Pro Wrestling Spotlight. And he's a certified wrestling historian, which I did not know you could be. But he's been
I'm gonna have to. We're gonna have to study. We're gonna have to get
gonna
on
get
that.
certified, girl. But he's been, yeah, a certified wrestling historian for I think like 25 years. We
I
have
was
a
like, where is that
brief.
getting certified? I'm like
We have.
very curious. Like, who's
I
the
know it.
board?
Is it kind of like getting ordained online? I'm just curious.
Honestly, I feel like it might be.
Well, you're about to see a certificate here next to next to my
Right?
picture of the Undertaker and Bret Hart. But
So good.
and then we also have some brief like interludes from Terry Shapinski, who is the Warlord, one half of the Powers of Pain duo. We meet Dr. George Zahorian. Like we have a whole cast of characters. But that's basically we have journalists, we have lawyers, we have doctors, we have former wrestlers. It was a whole crew.
Oh, yeah, the gambit, really.
Yeah, and the episode opens up with Jerry, the lawyer, taking you into his office. He has like paintings of the trial like on his wall of, the courtroom scenes and everything.
Oh yeah,
And
he's got
Jay,
like the courtroom like sketches, like the ones that they
yeah, the
give
sketches.
to like the media because the cameras weren't allowed like in the courtroom, the one that they like do the like voiceovers of and whatnot. I was like, he just has
Yeah,
them like framed in his office, and if that isn't the most like lawyer shark thing I've ever seen, like this man is
because
decorating his home with court drawings, and he's
of
just like,
scandalous trials he's been a part of.
right, 100%. So
Kind of kind of big dick energy, but also
really.
really scary.
Right. No, I know but
Really
like,
scary.
and that's him in a nutshell. Is like,
Yeah, fully. Honestly, it's terrifying and big dick energy.
and a little intriguing.
And a little fascinating. Like he is so hard to read and
Hmm.
he's so scary. But so we get JR is in it very briefly.
Yes.
But basically, JR right in the beginning says his intellect is, quote, scary. And that if he was ever embroiled in some crazy, literally hooker crook kind of scandal or whatever, he goes,
Hmm.
Jerry is the person I'm calling to get me out of it,
Right.
which is nuts.
That is nuts.
Um,
Because it's just like like he is so known for like getting people out of situations that like JR is like, if my life is like on the line, like
that's who
I'm
I'm
calling him
calling.
to save my ass. Like
And hooker crook, I feel like, is a very
telling
choice
of words.
selection of words. Yes,
Yeah.
of exactly.
I
And
agree. I agree.
yeah, so then we get like some where the introductions from the journalists. I do have a question for you because this was they mainly start talking about Vince and Hulk Hogan. And so this is like the 80s, late 80s into the 90s, and how Hulk Hogan has just taken wrestling to a whole other
Level.
level.
Right.
And I believe it was Dave Meltzer, yes, who said this, and I wanted your opinion on this. He says that he truly believes Vince McMahon would not be the person that he is if not for the star power of Hulk Hogan. Do you agree or
Uh
disagree? Or do we not know?
no, I agree.
You agree?
I think the
Wow.
company would not have succeeded to the level it did, especially in those early years. Hulk Hogan was like the main event of like the first like three WrestleManias. So, Hulk Hogan, like we talked about, this was kind of like the star that came about with the advent of like cable television, and like he was the first wrestler to be like nationally known. Everybody knew Hulk Hogan.
Right.
Everybody knew what he did. Everybody associated him with wrestling. Everybody was like, he became so popular, he became just part of pop culture. Like he was just so big. And he was a huge factor in like those early like kind of plays as far as like Vince McMahon kind of growing his company. Like
Mm.
the first WrestleMania was like a huge gamble, like a huge financial gamble. Like if
Oh,
it didn't
wow.
work, the company was going under. So like,
Oh my
and to
God.
have Hulk Hogan be like the centerpiece of that is
A
you
reason
is a
for its
there's a
success.
reason for that. Like
Yeah.
you you have to rely on the talent to draw people to spend the money. So
Mm.
Hulk Hogan was, as far as wrestling goes at that time, the draw. He was going to make, if he was on the card, he was going to make everybody that was on that card a lot of money.
Wow.
And Vince knew this and like knew what he had and kind of used Hulk to like brought in the WWF. So that's where
Mm.
he really took the WWF from like regional, just being located in New York in that whole area, to
Mm-hmm.
it became a national wrestling promotion, and then it became like an international promotion, and that was all based on like uh the sales that Hulk Hogan could bring. Uh
Wow.
so yeah, I agree with Dave that like the WWF, especially like back then, would not be what it is today without Hulk Hogan also being a part of that mix. Hulk Hogan, I
Fascinating.
will say, gives himself a little bit too much credit sometimes.
Mm.
You know,
I could see that.
as you one can assume, you know, an egotistical
Right.
wrestler might. But um yeah, Hogan was definitely a huge part in like progressing the company at that time. And
Word.
that's like kind of why they were so like close. Because Vince McMahon bought his company from his father.
Right.
So at this time, like Vince is like essentially like I'll equate it to like Tony Khan in like AEW now. He's like a young
Okay.
boss, like a young like entrepreneur. Like he's somebody that like the wrestlers like relate to on a personal level, not just on a like oh that's my
Mm.
boss kind of level.
Oh, I never
If
even
you're
thought
thinking
of
about it
that.
like during this time, like he's the same age as most of his wrestlers. That's why like later on in like the trial is like, oh, like we were friends. Like they like hung out. Like
That makes so much more sense. I don't know why I didn't ever think of that.
yeah. So this was like you know what I mean? Like he was a young boss. Like so
Yeah,
he was like a young, cool, relatable, whatever. So yeah, so that's kind of like where we're at as far as like um the WWF was definitely expanded on the back of Hulk Hogan and other wrestlers in that same kind of vein.
fascinating. And they were all on steroids, girl.
All of them,
Every last one.
every
So
last one of them.
John Arezzi goes in to talk about, Hulk Hogan is this huge star, and that you see this shift into these like humongous,
Hmm.
jacked wrestlers who have names like the Warlord, who is Terry Shapinsky,
The Ultimate
Hulk,
Warrior.
Ultimate Warrior, who they're all just massive, massive guys. And they are all getting steroids very easily, very accessibly, um, from this man called Dr. George Zahorian, which I thought this was fascinating. I did not know this was a thing. So he was the ringside physician for the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission, and I guess his job before the wrestlers wrestle, he like checks to make sure that he takes like their blood pressure, their heart rate, like he
Yeah,
checks to make sure they're in good physical condition, which for some reason I didn't think
yeah,
was
that
a
still
like I
that
didn't
still
know that was a
happens.
thing.
Yeah.
I love that, and I think that's amazing,
Hmm.
but not the way he did this. So Terry Japinski, the warlord, says like, yeah, you would get your checkup to make sure you were good to go. And at the end, he had this huge doctor bag, and
Right.
he would open it up. He goes, and it was full of anything you could think of,
R-
anything you could think of. Steroids, Tylenol 3, Klonopins, Somas, literally anything. And he'd be like, you want anything? And
and
if I don't have it, I'll
it's
get it to
funny.
you.
Somas is the drug of choice that got Sonny and Chris. It was the
Yep.
drug that Shawn Michaels was addicted to. It
Yep.
is it is not, you know, it's funny now that we know about it, hearing it like
Yes.
how prevalent it comes up and how much of a presence it had back then.
And how easy you were able to get it.
Was
And
literally
that's a
walking around with like an old school doctor bag, like that black doctor
yeah.
bag, like your
Mm-hmm.
like kids' toys come in, you know the one. And
Yeah, I
like
know her. I know her.
look was just like here just full of steroids. And like the thing that was like concerning was just like, oh, um, because he didn't like sound like a doctor. Like he was like, oh, like anything he would say like anything like I don't have, I can get. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like it
he's a drug dealer.
right.
He's a
That's
drug dealer.
yes, that's exactly
Moonlighting
what
as
it
a
is.
doctor, which happens a lot, to be honest. Like there's a lot
Correct.
of uh
It's a slippery
doctors
slope,
moonlight.
yes.
Yes, it's a lot of vice versa in that
Yeah.
arena, if you were to ask me. But John Arezzi also says, 90% of the wrestlers were on steroids at that time, and it was legal. It was
Yeah.
literally completely legal.
And, and it was
Terry,
big like across all sports because it was
yeah,
legal.
and they were talking about how like it was in the newspaper, people getting, like professional athletes, like track stars, football stars, like getting called out for using steroids, even though again, it's like perfectly legal.
Hmm.
But yes, go ahead.
Oh
Sorry.
no, I was gonna say they made a mention of the fact that like steroids were like the only kind of like drug where they were where the consumer was never told any of the side effects. Like there was never any kind of you know, watch any drug commercial ever. You had like
Uh,
you watch these old people walk through a park for 3.5 minutes, and then the last 20 seconds is someone speed
brrr.
rapping through side effects that like you've never heard of. So like this was like obviously like late 80s early 90s, but this was they said like steroids was like the one drug that like they just never ever explained what were the possible physical side effects of like prolonged use or
Mm-hmm.
like so. And
It's
that's
fascinating.
yeah, like is nuts.
And that comes into play later on in the
Right.
trial because it's you're talking about you make a law against something you're not even regulating. So it's like, where does it begin and end? Like,
Right.
what really is
What is
the
this about?
legislation? What is this about? Why is this like, it really is so interesting. And the lawyer says that it's the only, I have the quote, it's the only drug that was ever made in this country's history for which the drug manufacturer not required to give dosage, um, and adverse effects for the purpose it was intended, which was athletic enhancement. And people always say that steroids are misused. Like when people are using steroids, they're misusing it. It's supposed to be used for something else.
Right.
Like this, like somas are misused. They're a muscle relaxant for when you have muscular pain and people use
Right.
it recreationally. But like he's like,
Steroids are
it
meant for
was
like
literally,
injuries or if you're like gravely ill or you know they like they
but
have a
he
purpose. Like
but it was
they're
one of those things where it was like it was designed for athletic enhancement and ended up being used medically.
hmm
So they were using it the way it was originally intended to do.
right.
So it's like it was legal and they were technically using it for what it was made for.
Right.
So it's like again, like it's just fascinating. But
Yeah.
so the Anabolic Control Act happens in 1990, and the FBI, I'm unsure as to why they target this person. They don't really go into it, but they target a weightlifting coach named Bill Dunn. And to be honest, I don't know much about him. They didn't really explain specifically
Too
why the
much.
FBI
No.
targeted him, but he immediately becomes a rat. He's like, I
Oh.
can tell you exactly where I got it. I'll wear a
hmm
wire. I just do not send me to jail. He was like, not me, girl.
I know.
So
He's like, I'm too pretty for jail. I get it.
yeah,
I'm
so
kidding.
no, literally, I'm not going to federal prison.
No.
Federal prison?
No,
No.
don't get me wrong. I like definitely know my like strategy of what I would do to try to survive, but like I don't want to implement
I don't want to employ them BS-fully.
any
Like
bit
I've
of that.
thought about it. I
No,
thought
no,
about it, but
no.
that's the most I want to do is
I
think.
no, exactly. I just want to have a plan, and hope that I never have to enact
It's a break in case of
what I will
emergency
have to do to
situation.
survive. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't ever want to break that glass. So yeah, Bill Dunn wears a wire. They record this conversation he has with Dr. Zahorian because that is where he's getting the drugs.
hmm
And this this
Is
gets me.
crazy.
We talked about this. I think this is insane. First of all, an FBI agent is talking casually to a colleague, like in a bar, about the case that they're building against Dr. George Zahorian. And the colleague he's talking to happens to be somehow tied to the WWE and warns Vince McMahon's wife Linda, or like it ends up getting coming to her attention because he says something,
Right.
and she immediately says like we got to distance ourselves from this guy because like there's no way like we can get wrapped
Right.
up in this.
And
It's too
it's
little
like
too late, but
it's like in an official like memo like
document. Like we don't
from
know
her.
him. We've never
Like
seen him. Yeah.
yeah.
So crazy. Like girl, just the way you can't gab in public, girl. Like you just can't about certain things. The
Ooh.
FBI putting their own foot in their mouth, not
Oy.
surprising.
Nah,
But
that's crazy.
in as they obviously the FBI nabs Dr. Zahorian, they search his office and they find a picture
hmm
of Dr. Zahorian, Vince McMahon, and Hulk Hogan just like arm in arm, like buddy buddy. And they're like, hmm,
What's that
what's
about?
this? Yeah, what this? Why they're all friends? And this, so we also meet B. Brian Blair,
Right.
who's a professional wrestler, part of the B somethings. I can't remember.
I don't remember who.
Killer Bees, the Killer Bees.
Yes.
I
Very
was like,
good.
has something to do with
I
bees.
was like, yeah, I was like, he predates my time, really.
Yeah, he was with the Killer Bees, and he's like, I one night, so he I guess used to get packages delivered to his house of steroids, whatever, what have
hmm
you, from Dr. George, and he said one night the FBI knocked on his door and they were like, hey, so we know you've been getting packages from Dr. George Zahorian, and like if you don't want to go to jail, like you'll have to testify in his trial. And basically what the FBI was doing, which scares the crap out of me.
Oh, this is very much a thing. I know just because I was very briefly a mailman. So I know that this
Yeah,
is like very much a thing.
I know, which is really scary because my dad was also a postman,
Right.
and he would always joke like if I opened up like one of my sister's mail or something, he'd be like, that's a federal crime.
Right.
But it's like also the post office is a government entity, but also FedEx is privately owned, so they can also do whatever they want with your mail, really, at the
Right.
end of the day, which is so crazy. Like because FedEx and UPS are privately owned,
Right.
so they can just let people search your mail if you want.
Right.
Um Or at least it used to be like that. I could be wrong. Things change. But basically, the FBI was going to the FedEx distribution center. Any outgoing mail from Dr. George Zahorian, they would open, they would search it,
Take
they would take
pictures.
pictures of everything, and then put it back exactly how they found it and ship it. And if they saw that the person took it off the front porch and opened it, it was a wrap for you. Like you were immediately, you were gonna have to testify.
Right.
So
Which is crazy.
imagine the FBI showing up at your door and being like, saw you took that package in. What's that?
Right.
Like, and then you're like,
And don't
nothing.
lie because we know.
We have pitches. We got pitches. That
Oh,
is, it really is so scary. Like, I know, again, federal government, the government generally, just what is such an entity that has so many nooks and crannies and twists and turns
oh,
that like
100%.
just keep me up at night. It's like so crazy. They're just looking through your mail, girl.
Girl.
I mean, they have no
That's why I love when people like freak out about like signing up for things or like giving away their email or like they think they're being tracked. And I'm
they
like,
already,
I was like, they give you a number when you're born.
mm.
They got you. They know
Do
what
you,
I was like this like notion that like they don't or like don't have the ability to like get you if they really want is so cracked. I was like, baby, you got a phone. It
if
has
you have a phone, it's over.
it's
It's
over.
over.
You
If you
have
have
a
a mailing
location.
address, it's over.
You have location tracking on that wherever you are. I was
Ever.
like, wherever you are, you have an address, you have a social security number, you're on the grid, baby. Like you're not gonna escape the U.S. government if the U.S. government wants
Wants
you.
to
Like
find
it's
you.
just
That's
not
it.
happening.
I find peace in the fact that I'm not interesting enough.
That's what I'm
Like I'm like
saying.
I'm actually
I'm
not
so
interesting
bland.
enough. Yeah, like every time like people are like, "Oh, like cover your laptop camera." I'm like, "They don't care what I'm doing. I'm not
No,
interesting. They don't want to
listen.
know."
If my FBI agent wants to see what I'm doing on my laptop, psh,
Go for it.
you're welcome.
You're the only one who cares. Swear
Right? I was
but
like,
thanks.
I always say this. I've always said I want to write a show where it's just you living your life, and then the flip side of it is like your FBI agent that has been assigned to you, like reacting to like your life, very much like a Truman Show or like a you know
I
what I
would
mean.
love that.
I just think it would be so funny,
Our
like a
FBI agents right now are like, "Oh, that's good.
right, they're like
That's really
writing it
good."
down like furiously,
Yeah,
like,
they're
hey
like, "Oh my God.
boys.
Well,
We're trying to start a buddy cop kind of sitcom.
yeah, like contact us finally." Like my phone dings. It's
It's like,
like
yeah, they're like,
we're at the back door.
no, 100%, like open up. And you're like,
We'll see you there. Yeah, let's
anyway,
get I'm trying to be friends with my FBI agent. But
yeah, exactly.
again,
Anyway, we've gotten so off
so
course.
off okay, sorry.
No,
Um
it's fine. It was me. Like,
no. I was like, the FBI scares me. But anyway, so one of those packages they track to Hulk Hogan's house. So Hulk Hogan is getting door dashed steroids basically from Dr. George Zahorian
mm-hmm.
and is chosen to testify. However, the lawyer, what was his name?
McDivitt.
I already forgot. McDivitt, thank you. McDivitt gets Hulk Hogan off by saying that Hulk had approached Dr. George Zahorian with personal information outside of steroids like fertility things to have kids, like normal
Just, just,
run-of-the-mill doctor things, and it would
yeah,
violate doctor-patient confidentiality if he were to have to testify at that trial.
right. Which
And
is crazy.
which is insane because all the journalists were talking, they're like, it's one of those things you just don't understand, like how he did not have to testify,
While other
and
wrestlers did.
while
Like,
others were forced to do it, like they had no
right.
choice or they were going to jail. And
And
the
it was
lawyer
very much just to protect like the biggest star
star
of his company. And it's crazy. It's like Hulk Hogan's entire thing back then was like saying your prayers, eating your vitamins.
vitamins.
Like it's crazy. Like the just the irony of what he was like having to testify, what like being called to testify for versus like what he is like portrayed and accepted by America for is just like
Yeah.
they cannot exist in the same world, which clearly they understood and like were like, no, we have to get him out of this.
Yeah, and it's really funny because the lawyer says, I forget whatever president had to, was it Ronald Reagan or something, had to testify at somebody else's trial, and they were like, how come he had to do it? And he goes, I guess he didn't have as good of a lawyer,
Right.
which is nuts.
Mm.
But yeah, so it's funny because then we meet Phil Mushnick, who is a New York Post sports columnist, and he really I loved him, to be honest. Like he was like fierce. Like he was like
Oh
really
yeah.
aggressive, but I really loved him because they're saying like, yeah, like Hulk got off on medical things, and he immediately cuts him and he goes, "That's bullshit." Like he's
Right.
like that it was so stupid. He goes, if you're the one, and literally like you said, if you're the one saying say your prayers, eat your vegetables and take your vitamins and you can like grow up to be big and strong like me, then but you're taking steroids, your career should be ruined. Is like
Right.
literally what he says. He goes, if you're worried about your career, you should be because you're a big liar, a big fat liar who lies. Like he's like you're
Yeah,
just a
he's
piece of
like, you're a
garbage.
fraud. Like that's he's like, how do you like he's like, how does like telling the truth might hurt your image work as an excuse to get out of like court? It's like it should hurt your image
It
if what
should.
you're doing is contradictory to what you're telling everybody else that you're doing. That
Yeah.
should hurt your image. Like you publicly like lying essentially, like that should be a red flag for everybody. Like
Yeah.
there's no reason why that like he was on it. And like honestly, I agree. I'm just like, no,
No, I
that makes
do.
sense. Like
I
there
agree.
is
And
no like sound reason why other people were forced to do this and he was not, just because he was a bigger star that needed to be protected.
right. And it's like, what are we protecting at this point? It's like it's kind of like again, I love
Money,
wrestling, but we're
money.
yes. And I wanted to get into this when we talk about him going on Arsenio Hall, but like I personally felt like there was no reason to lie because you were doing it when it was legal and now it's illegal and like everyone loves like a comeback story. So like
Right.
Hulk Hogan, like I feel like it would have been maybe fine. Like I again, you never know, but if he was like, yes, like I did do steroids, but I'm like like, and he
You
has
could
this
have
whole
treated it the way
redemption
that people
arc.
talk about like smoking nowadays, where it's just like, oh, like, yeah, we all smoked, but like we didn't know. Like,
We didn't know, right?
right,
And
you know
like
what I
again, he
mean?
really didn't. Again, like we said, there was no information on long-term side effects. It wasn't legal at first until 1990. Like and to have like a redemption arc, I feel like would have and
Served him
again,
better.
yes, and you never know how it's really going to be received. But to me, I love those kinds of stories because it's like, okay, you're human like me. Like, yes, I put you on a pedestal and like you are an amazing person, but like you are human like me. You make
But if
mistakes, and I
anything, that
like you
makes
better
me
for that.
more resolute in like raising them up, is
Yes.
that like, oh, like yes, you are human and you are flawed and you do like mess up, but you still like achieve a certain level of success, or you carry yourself a certain way, or you come
Yes.
back from adversity. That, if anything, is like, oh, like that's all the more reason to put you on a pedestal than just being like, he's a good wrestler. Like that's
Then
not a good enough
lying.
reason. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's just
like so you made mistakes and you're a liar about it. Like,
right.
but you made mistakes and you're honest about it, especially your image of say your prayers, eat your vegetables, and take your vitamin. Like, it works even with your image. Like,
Right.
it just to me was like crazy. But as we find out, like I think we know that Vince wanted him to tell the truth and he just didn't because um after the trial and everything, Vince hosts a press conference and announces a new drug policy
Mm-hmm.
the same day. And I think it was John Arezzi who was like, I mean, you could say it's a coincidence or completely by design. The same night Hulk Hogan goes on Arsenio Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Um, famous late night talk show host, love Arsenio Hall.
Yeah, same.
Um, and I just wrote lawyer freaks me out because someone asked him, one of the producers, like, did you discuss with Terry Hulk Hogan his appearance on Arsenio Hall? And he said, yes, but I can't tell you what the discussion was because that's privileged information. And so basically Vince goes on, he is announcing the WWF will be doing drug screenings, drug tests for all the wrestlers moving forward, want to like move in a new direction, la la
Right.
la. And Hulk goes on Arsenio Hall and he doesn't deny that he's ever used steroids, but he said he used them like 3
He
times
like
in 1983 when
minimizes
they were
it.
illegal. Yes, and it was because he had a bicep injury. And he goes, "But I've never been an abuser of steroids and like
Mm-hmm.
whatever." And like if you want, and then he kind of makes it like preachy, which really bothered me. He was like, "If you can basically like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps
No,
thing,"
he
which I just
basically turns it
automatically
into
hate.
like a wrestling promo. And like
Yes, and
eh,
not the time or place,
no,
seriously.
no, it's like you're in a position where like your credibility has been called out because of this, this, and this. So you
Yep.
have the opportunity to like we said, like own up to it and like steer us in a different direction. And instead, you like do this weird like shuffle, like half admit it, half deny it. You know what I mean? It was like a yeah, like I did it, but it wasn't that bad. Like and like you know what I mean? And it's just like, why would you not take the opportunity to like clear your name? And like I don't know, it just felt like so forced and like you just turned it into like a run of the mill like let me tell you something brother and you're like okay like
And
all
he
right.
like blamed the media. He was like the media lies and like whatever. But I was really curious about this because Vince, we find out, did not know. Like he wanted Hulk to just be honest.
Right.
And the fact that the lawyer had had a private conversation with
Mm-hmm.
Hulk, and obviously Vince didn't know about it because based on what Hulk Hogan said, you presume the lawyer advised him to not say like, yeah, I use steroids. Like
Right.
you presume that that's what happened because he was like, well, I can't discuss that, it's privileged information, and that's what he goes on to say. So it's like fascinating to me that this lawyer is representing, he's represented various members of the WWE for 30 years, but
Mm-hmm.
also like there's even some things he doesn't discuss with Vince McMahon about like the plan and path.
Right.
And it's like it's fascinating to me because
Crazy.
that's
Uh,
just like
yeah, and apparently Vince was like pissed.
pissed,
So
so pissed because um after this, they go on, I forget the name of the show, but
Vince
it's
is
like a
on like a
panel.
show, yeah.
It's like a panel. So like Dave Meltzer is there, John Arezzi is there, and like they're discussing it, and basically they're like, it's because this was great too. I think it was Wade Keller who was like, yeah, Hulk Hogan's Arsenio Hall did not pass the sniff test. Everyone was like, okay, so you lied, which I think is hysterical. I
I
think
love
everyone's
that.
like, okay, so you lied, like didn't
Mm-hmm.
fool anybody. Love that because I was like, wow, I can't believe he would do that. And then it's like nobody believed him anyway. I
No,
was like,
because
okay, sick, great.
everybody that is a
Lucy,
wrestling fan can smell a wrestling promo from a mile away. Like you're
period.
really like you really out
Me,
here.
you're
No.
selling me the same package you had
No.
sold. Like I've seen this already. Next.
Right. And like you putting it in this context is not where I believe it.
Fully. Like this doesn't make it like, oh, you're on a late night show now. I believe it, girl, please.
No. No thanks.
But he's on this panel and John Arezzi is like, didn't you say you were devastated when you found out that Hulk didn't tell the truth on Arsenio Hall? And Vince is like,
Hmm.
not me. I never said that. And John Meltzer just immediately throws under the bus and goes, that's what you said to me.
Right. No,
Like, that's
fully.
what you said. Like,
Uh,
and Vince is just like, his
the
reaction
look on Vince's face.
chilled me to the bone.
It was literally he gave like either John Arezzi or Dave Meltzer like a look for being called out like on TV in a lie that like you he if he had powers he would have just like burned a hole right through these people.
John
It
said that he
he
was like,
looked evil
it
like
was if
and
looks could kill.
yeah and like and like that's to me that's like now that we know all that we know about Vince I was like that's the real guy.
That's the real guy.
That's the
Fully.
real guy.
That scare I literally wrote that. Like that scared me more than anything else. Like that look, it was like I just saw your real face.
Yeah.
And it was scary.
Hmm.
It was really, really unbelievable.
Right. It's like ugh, this
Eyes of
was
the
so
devil.
lame. I don't know how much Charmed you've ever watched, but the first time that like you find out that Cole is Balthazar is like this demon is like so because he's like such a like hot guy like
I
coming to like
know.
seducing like Alyssa Milano's character and like all of a sudden you find out he's like this like ugly, like red face, like demon. It just felt very similar to that. Where it's just like,
No,
oh,
it
like you're
does.
Satan.
You are Satan. Like I literally saw like it's if his flesh melted off and he became like
The
the
embodiment.
yes,
Like,
he became what's that the guy the villain in Captain America. We've been talking about Captain America so much. The
uh,
red face guy.
oh God, I don't
Right?
remember.
Doesn't his like face melt off and he's just like a
Yeah,
red skull?
yes, but who?
Yeah.
What? I don't remember names. I'm the
I don't
worst
know.
at
Is
that.
he the red skull? Whatever. Guys, anyway. You know who we are, whatever.
Moving on.
But then this is so crazy. So
Oh
I said that
yeah.
about every single thing about this episode, but
Because it was like a ride from the jump. I'm telling you, everything that like that was discussed in this episode, I was like, no way, like no
we were saying like
way.
we paused and paused, rewound, like we did so much like stop and start because we were just like,
No.
what is scribble, like writing so many notes.
Mhm.
But after that panel, John Arezzi says that I was not home, but my mother used to live with me at the time, and that very same night two guys in black suits showed up at my house and it said, "Does John Arezzi live here?" And his mother was like, "Yeah, but he's not home." And they said, "Well, just let him know that he lives in a really dangerous neighborhood."
Right. Like what mob boss energy is this?
Literally chills. And what the lawyer said actually really freaked me out, but it was such a read. And I was like, I want to use this maybe. But like he
Hmm.
said, these people, he goes, "Ugh, they just have that's the problem with these people. They have such vivid imaginations. Like they tell themselves things like this to seem important when nobody really cares about them.
Right. He's like nobody would spend like the time to send two people
Stalk you." Which
like,
like
which
what?
it's like such a crazy thing. Like that's a just a messed up thing to
So
say, but
hard. Like you it
but
makes
it
them
is
feel more
so
important than they are. Like
no, but it's such a like I was like, you're not even worth like and like
you're
that's the end like you're not even worth the energy of doing this. So I don't know why
yeah,
you think that like Vince McMahon of all people is like sending mobsters after you.
like decapitation. Like that was like social decapitation. Like that was so harsh.
Oh my God. He's
But
out
but
here just
it makes you it's very gaslighty because
it does.
you're like, wait,
Did
did that
he?
happen? Yeah, you're like,
Hmm.
maybe the mother's senile. Like it just it makes
I
you
don't
like
know. That's nuts. That's
it
absolutely
puts that
insane.
little like thing in your brain that makes you start questioning that. Oh, it's just so dark. It's
Right.
so dark
I'm
because did
telling
it
you, this
happen? Didn't
lawyer,
it?
this lawyer.
And I like he has that way of speaking there you just believe him. You're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And then you're like, "Wait, no. No." Like
Right. Right. Grain of salt. Grain of salt. Remember who's
yeah.
defending.
Um and Phil Mushnick also says something crazy where he's like there was he had a group of men following him, which now this is like kind of aligning with like what John Redzi said. He has a group of men that follows him called the Fairfax Partners, and they're former FBI agents that are
Right.
tailing him. And Phil, and for some reason, I just believe everything Phil says. Like
And just
he
something about him.
he said that he said that basically he ran into one of the people following him and they went and got drinks and the guy was like, "Yeah, I'm literally being paid to tail you." Like, ha ha ha. Like, and he said we were laughing, drinking. He goes,
Right.
"Yeah,
Like
I'm trying to
what a
dig up dirt
weird.
on you." Yeah, Phil's like he had these people following me to try and get dirt on me because they literally accused me of being an FBI informant. And I thought this was funny. He goes, "Yeah, I informed them. I wrote stuff. They read it and chose to follow my leads or not. Like sure, I'm
Right.
an FBI informant." But he
I he
said
was so funny to me.
he was
There's
hysterical.
something
He didn't
he's
give
just
a
like
single F, not a single one.
no. And like he just remember he like in my head when I like think of like old school like journalists, like that's who I'm like imagining. You know what
He's
I
on the
mean?
beat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's like
100%. Like
he's out
you
there with his little like flippy detective notepad and
oh,
he's getting the
absolutely.
story.
Ugh. Yes, yes, yes. I absolutely live for it.
100%. Um and I guess so then I guess in one of Phil Mushnick's articles, he like calls for another federal
Investigation.
trial, yeah, investigation, and he goes again, like, I guess I am an FBI informant because they listened, and they subpoena Vince McMahon on April 2nd, 1992.
Yeah, with like
And
seven or
they
eight like subpoenas.
Yeah, and the lawyer was like, you just when you get those documents, there's just sometimes when like there's going to be no throwing of this case out, like it's going to be a witch hunt, like they are just going to dig and take you for everything. He goes, but I knew I had at least 18 months to prepare, which is crazy.
Hmm.
So I just started researching, reading, diving into absolutely any and all information I could get on steroids,
Right.
which I thought was fascinating. And like, I mean, you say what you want about this man. He's so crazy. Total. Xavier said it yesterday to me. He was like, he's the definition of like when people call lawyers a shark, like dead
This
eyes,
guy,
a
like,
killer. Like, but
absolute killer.
he did his job. Like, he was like, I'm just going to spend these 18 months researching every possible thing I could find out.
Right.
And he did. Like,
No, fully. He did.
and he did.
Um,
Um, sorry,
no,
what?
so during this time, like this is like what should we call it? Just like tabloid like explosion. Like this is all over the media. This is all anybody can like talk about as far as like in reference to the WWF. So like just like this is the circus they were looking for. You know what I mean?
100%. And
So
I forget that they must have still been wrestling at this time. Like it's not like the WWE took an
it
18
doesn't
month
stop.
break.
Yeah, no,
It
no,
just
no.
keeps going. I'm so fascinated. Like I because this is 1992, so it's not like too far before we started watching, like just a couple of years,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is crazy. Like the show must go on, and like Vince McMahon, I guess, because for 18 months he's not like it's not like he's on house arrest. Like he's probably still working. Like I don't even know. But they're
Right.
just preparing. Like they're just getting ready for when it actually like goes to the indictment like actually hits, like or when it
Right.
actually goes to trial. And I thought this was interesting too. So while they're building the case, and they barely mention this, but I'm fascinated by it, McMahon's former driver was going to testify that he
Right.
like literally was like basically said he was kind of like a drug mule. Like they would drive in Vince's limo, drop drugs off directly at Hulk Hogan's door and like drive away. And then somehow like, and they kind of skirted around why, like his testimony just gets thrown out.
Right. And
And
I'm like, I want to know more.
I want to know more. And like, where is he now? Because they said it was like he had tried to like sue them for something else and they caught him in, like he was like
Like perjuring
lying,
himself. Yeah.
perjuring himself. And I was like, but it was so vague and kind of like random. And then they never talked about it
And
again.
very
But
like dismissive of this person. So just like what I was like, I don't, you know what I mean? Because I have to take everything with a grain of salt because it's just like, am I supposed to just like take the word of this lawyer at like face value that like, oh, this guy was just lying, so like
testimony
it
from,
had to be like thrown out.
because
Um,
imagine how useful that testimony would have been. Like, could have changed everything.
mhm.
Because he was with him, he drove him everywhere.
Right,
He knows where he was going and when and what and to who. Like I
right,
was like I would love to know what that was about.
100%. Get this man on the phone.
I'm telling you, and like this is really really dark, but like I would not be surprised if he was dead.
No, I mean, who knows? Like, I don't know. This was a while
I'm always
ago.
like
Like, it was like 30 years ago. So
exactly.
a lot of the people that were like that testified are no longer with us. So
Exactly. I'm like wink. No, I'm sorry. Sorry. So dark, so dark. Um
not us just
I'm kidding.
assuming
I'm
that
kidding.
the
I'm
man is
kidding.
also a mob boss. I can't.
Well, whatever.
I mean,
Listen.
it's nothing is nothing. What is it? Anything is possible in the WWF. So
Yeah,
like,
a loaded statement.
amen.
Um so in the time between waiting for the indictment to hit, Vince is starting to switch the image of the WWE to kind of like say like look at all these other wrestlers we have that aren't gigantic steroid
Right,
boosted
right.
hulks. And starts switching to smaller, more athletic wrestlers, which I think is interesting because we are
Yeah,
literally witnessing the genesis of that on the other show, where it's like we're doing smaller, athletic, high flying, flippy
right.
circus,
So
like the
yeah,
whole
so this
thing.
is like this, especially like this 1992, 1993, is when the like the mantle goes from like Hulk to Brett. Uh
Oh,
Brett ends up being kind of like the face for that like younger athletic like transition period.
a new
Um
face.
Yeah, because it's actually like Brett who becomes like the champion after that in like 1993, 1994. So um
Wow.
so this is like apparently these trials had put like a strain on the relationship between Hulk and Vince,
Mm-hmm.
and Vince was kind of then taking he had to change what the product looked like
Mm-hmm.
um to go forward, because otherwise he was always going to be kind of pigeonholed into this like, oh, like they're all on steroids, they're all massive, they all look like a certain way. So there was never going to be, if he didn't like transition away from that, like there was always going to be an association with this trial.
Mm-hmm.
So he like had to shift, but that meant like people like Hulk, like people who were of that like age and who were like massive or whatever, um, were starting to get kind of like left behind because the focus was no longer going to be on them.
Right.
So,
Which sucks, but also like again, he really had no choice. Like he had to do it with, selfishly, like
right.
switch the image. And Hulk Hogan leaves. Like he leaves the WWE and allegedly goes to WCW, I believe.
Yeah, so he like goes around like Hollywood for a while, and then he takes a meeting with Eric Bischoff, who ends up he's like was in charge of WCW during this time. They meet in Florida where Hulk Hogan is filming something, and so they
Mm,
meet, and Hulk at this point like thinks he's like done wrestling, but Eric kind of convinces him to come on board, and it is, as far as like wrestling goes, like I said, Hulk was the man, like
mm,
the draw for professional wrestling. So when he shows up in WCW, it was a huge deal. And
wow.
and all of WCW, like from that point after, is built off of the back that, oh, like this is where Hulk Hogan is. That's where you want to be. And that's how they get like
Mm.
your Macho Mans, your like Razor Ramon or Scott Hall, like your Diesel, like is that Hulk, because he was such a huge household name, that they were like, oh, like that's where Hulk's going? Like Hulk must be getting paid. So like
Girl, yeah.
they all end up going that way. Plus, Vince was also like shifting away from the talent he had already leaned on. So like
Mm-hmm.
if you're not going to be used somewhere like where you were, and you got somebody else coming up and it's like all of a sudden like I have a bunch of money and a new show for you to, stay relevant on, that's what happened.
Yeah. Wow.
Crazy.
It's fascinating how many things are happening in tandem, like at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, because that Miami trip where he's filming, I believe, is also the trip where Randy shows up and like looks for Elizabeth, right? Because wasn't he filming a movie and Hulk had to like
Oh
leave?
yeah. Wow, that's
I'm pretty sure
crazy.
that's also happening in tandem. So it's
That's
like
nuts.
he's potentially going to WCW. He's filming a movie. He has to break up a fight, a domestic fight between Randy Savage and Ms. Elizabeth. Like,
Crazy.
because she,
Crazy, crazy, crazy.
girl, that would be like so much overstimulation for
And
me.
that, and like even if it wasn't like the same trip or it's still like the same couple of years. Like it's the
Yeah,
same
it's the same handful of years. Yeah.
nuts.
So, oh wow. So like Vince is also he's handling this trial. He's also got all the things going on with Randy and Ms. Girl, it's crazy. So in November of 1993 is when the indictment finally hits, and the lawyer was like, "Yeah, we like kind of celebrated because we were like, all right, great, now we can finally like get this done." So it's
Right.
literally been 18 months, like, and they've just been waiting, like in a holding pattern. That would drive
And
me
being
nuts.
watched,
And
mind
being
you.
watched, being tailed, being like whatever.
Because it's not like the FBI like stops watching you once, you get your little piece of paper that says like you're going to trial. It's like no, 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 no. They're waiting for you to mess up this whole time.
The whole time, yeah, that would like I could not imagine living
Eggshells.
on just a knife's edge for that long. Just
Right.
crazy. Which I guess Vince, I mean, I feel like his whole career was like that, but
Yeah.
and Vince Vince shows up to trial
Oh my
in a neck
God.
brace,
So comical.
which cracked me up. And
So absurd.
the lawyer swore up and down that it was a legitimate neck surgery that he got, and he like
Hmm.
was trying to get it scheduled,
So that he
but he
wouldn't
had
have
to
to have
delete
it on
it.
TV, and like
But
we were just like, okay.
girl, please, like
Not,
sympathy.
you're right. Not him showing up in just like not the sympathy neck brace. Like I can't. Like that
The
is like
sympathy
that
neck
is like
brace is crazy.
sitcom level. like
And we've seen it. People do it
visuals.
all the time.
Like
It's like so weird. Like especially the neck. Like the neck, it's such a specific like
thing. I
weird
don't know.
thing. But it just cracked me up. Cracked me up. We find out that a man named Sean O'Shea is the prosecutor. And he has apparently a stacked lineup of wrestlers allegedly going to testify against Vince, including the Ultimate Warrior. But there is a conflict of interest on the defending side for McDivitt and Vince McMahon because McDivitt had previously represented Hulk
and
for
getting him
something
out of
and
testifying in the
getting him out of
last trial.
yeah. So he wasn't able to represent Vince for some reason. I guess because
Yes,
they were
because because Hulk was a person like testifying for the I don't know, the other side.
mhm.
He, as the lawyer, was not going to be able to like question Hulk and whatever
Cross-examine him.
because
Yes,
he has a prior like existing work
relationship.
relationship with Hulk.
Okay.
So it's a conflict of interest. So they had to get another lawyer to represent Vince specifically, while McDivitt represented the WWF, like the company.
Yes.
So that's how he got around that. Because otherwise he would have not been able to be on the case at all.
Yeah. And he was like, and that wasn't about to happen. Like I
No.
was gonna be on this case. So he enlists the help of a woman named Laura Bravetti, who is also insane, in my
Right.
opinion. But we don't get an interview from her, but we'll get into some of the tactics her and her secret husband get into. But it's so interesting because the lawyer mentions this and it does seem that way. Like the prosecution with the wrestlers they choose, it kind of like I don't know, it's like they didn't either vet them or they just like didn't come through with like what they thought they were gonna say because the warlord testifies and he's like, I mean, I Vince never gave me steroids. He never forced me to take any. He never said if I don't take steroids, I'll be fired. And honestly, I didn't even buy steroids from Dr. Zahorian because he was too expensive. I could get them for way cheaper
Right.
elsewhere. And
Right.
he was like supposed to be, you know what I mean? Like I just felt like
And a
their
lot of the
witnesses
like
were
a lot of the general story was just like, oh no, like I was doing steroids like long before I got here.
I
Like
already had a whole routine of
like
doing
a
steroids
regimen,
before
yeah.
yes, a regimen before I came here. So I don't
Which just
know.
kind of shot that whole argument that like Vince was like pushing the steroids on his like people.
Right.
Because like there are his people just being like, oh, like no, like I've been doing that.
I've
Like
been doing that. Like I was there more access to them when I got into the WWE? Maybe, but that's not necessarily at the hands of Vince. Like there's just more doctors around. There's more
right.
access. I have more like,
I
money.
have more
Like
money. I have yeah,
yes,
there's
it's just an accessibility thing. It has nothing to do with like
Vince
Vince. Which
being
I'm
the
like,
pusher.
yes, which I'm like, these are the people you chose to be your witnesses. Like it's kind of weird.
Right. I was like,
Um,
you didn't think about this before you sent them up there?
yeah, like hello. And they think they might have a winner with this wrestler whose name is Nails. And said that Vince forced him to take steroids. But everyone says the argument is weak because he's always wearing like an orange jumpsuit. He doesn't ever have like he's never exposed muscles like
Like his
on
body
some
is like isn't on display. Like his
yes,
character, like it doesn't make sense to be like, oh, you have to take steroids to look good. Like
yeah. Like and if the Ultimate Warrior is saying like he didn't push them on me, like why would he be saying he pushed them on you?
right.
And it's funny because like I guess Laura Bravetti is the one cross-examining him, and she's like, this was so heinous. She's like, "Do you have a lot of animosity towards Vince?" And he says, "No." And then she turns around to the jury and goes, "He doesn't know what animosity means. Do you hate Vince?" And he goes, "Yes."
Yeah.
Which is like,
That's brutal.
which is just
That is just that if, on the
KO.
ground, just like for the jugular. I was like,
Time of death.
he doesn't know
Yeah.
what that means, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna ask him a dumber version of the same question. And you're just like,
Do you hate that man over there?
no, and you're just like, oh
Yes.
my God.
Heinous. Like
Oh
right
my
to the
God.
jugular. Just,
Right.
you
And
know.
this part's also like crazy is that they bring in Dr. Zahorian from prison and the way the lawyer made it like hit like Zahorian's journey sound like it was just a harrowing tale of like this guy went through like 40 days and 40 nights of like solitary confinement, just like showing up in like different prisons, and like he came out like he was just kept in the dark, and when he finally like was like brought to the light, it was the second he was brought onto the witness stand, and you're just like, what is
But
this?
but did he though?
I
Because
don't
that's what he
know.
wrote in the letter, and I don't put that past the government. Like that's why it's so scary.
No,
Like
I
it's
know
just
that it was just like it was crazy, and like the only thing that made me like about it was that later on, like when they're talking about it, he's like he made a point to like once again bring up the 40 days 40. I was like, you're not on trial anymore, baby. Like we get it. Like
we got it, yeah. But he was like, he got this letter, and he's like, I read it out loud to the jury and was like, this is what the government is doing to people. Like they're shuffling them around in, feet, waist, wrist braces or chains, and they're like shuffling them in the dark solitary confinement, different prisons for no reason, no explanation than just shoving people out there to like go on trial. He goes, this is what the government's doing.
right.
And it's just like
Yikes.
again, it's one of those things where it's like, is it hyperbolized? I'm sure. But also it is weird. And like
Right.
you're like, I don't know if it's not true. Like I don't
Right.
know, like it's just a creepy thing. And like I guess initially he comes out and says like Vince and I never had any conversations about steroids or
Right. He's
whatever.
like, I
And
don't
then
know
he
what you're
gets like,
talking about. Yeah.
and the lawyer's like, he gets dragged off the stand and put in a room. And then like eventually he comes back, and apparently they had like, said like, we have you. And this like harkens back to when Dunn, the weightlifting coach, was
Mhm.
like wired. And he goes, we have you, allegedly, the FBI said to this man, like, we have you on audio being okay and affirmative about selling steroids to children. And we haven't brought you up on those charges. So if you don't want to be brought up on those charges about selling drugs to children, you're going to go back out there and you're going to
Right.
come up with something better than what you just did.
Right.
And
And
then he
that's
comes
crazy. That's crazy.
crazy. And again, we don't know because there's no proof that that happened.
Right.
The lawyer wasn't there for that conversation. I don't know how he knows that or who told him that or where he got that information
Right.
from. But again, it's one of those things that makes you ask more questions than the answers that were provided, where you're like, I just,
I'm so confused.
because what if that happened, I wouldn't be surprised. If it didn't, I wouldn't be surprised. But either way, it's weird because then he comes back out and is like, oh yeah, no, Vince and I like talked about giving steroids to his wrestlers all the time.
Right.
Like
Like, or that
complete
like Vince was very
180.
much like in the know that like he was selling to his wrestlers.
Yeah. And yeah, and he's like, and Vince never told me to stop. Was completely aware of it and let me just keep going and like whatever. So
Hmm.
like the story switches up, but I guess it doesn't really have any traction because they never like really mention it again, and it doesn't really seem to hold weight.
No, because it's one thing to be like, and especially again, the context, like the drugs are legal during the
Right.
time that this is happening. So it's like it's
Yeah.
one thing to have a conversation where it's like, oh, like, hi, like I'm selling to your wrestlers, and he's like, okay. And like, you know what I mean? And it's
Great.
another thing
Okay.
to be like, it's another like completely different situation where Vince is the one purchasing the drugs and then pushing it on his wrestlers. Like those are two different scenarios.
Totally different things. Totally
And like
different
that's
things.
what was the distinction that was made. It was just like, okay, like having a conversation where he knows that steroids are in use is one thing. Like
But
him being the one to be like pushing the steroids on people is a different thing, and that there is
completely.
no proof of that.
And like to the jury, it's like, okay, so the man who was selling the steroids is already in jail. Like he's right
Right.
there, and we brought him out of jail. He's already in jail. So like, what
Right.
are we doing? And like, there's still no proof that Vince made anybody do anything.
Right.
And then they bring out Emily Feinberg, who is Vince's assistant,
Mm-hmm.
and this was terrifying.
Oh
This
God.
freaked me out, dude.
Right.
So they're talking about so it's like Meltzer and Arezi who are there. They're like, it was so crazy. Like Emily Feinberg had so much information And Laura Bravetti had an answer to everything she said. Dave Meltzer was like, it's like she had ESP. Like she literally knew the
It
questions
was,
before she
he's
even
like, it was
said anything.
immediate. It was like she would say a response, she had a response. Like it was like,
It was instant. And you find out that Laura Bravetti had a husband, but she kept it super under wraps that she was married. He literally, they said it was her secret husband.
yeah.
And he was pumping, I literally just got chills. He was pumping the assistant for info on the side, saying, like, promising her like book deals and, oh, like, I want to hear your story so we can like see if we're interested in writing a book about it. So she literally told him everything. He also approached Dave Meltzer about and said he was like a reporter in the beginning of the trial, just asking him his thoughts, whatever, like any information he had. And he called
Oh no, it was the other guy. It
he
was
called he called the guy from the New York Post
oh
too and
yeah, yeah.
pretended he was from 60 Minutes.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Got it,
He
got it, got it.
called that guy and was like, "Yeah, I'm from 60 Minutes. Do you have anything? We're covering the trial. Like, do you have any info that you haven't already written about? Whatever." And the guy was like, "If I do, then I'll write it and you can read about it." Which I
Right.
loved him. He was like, I'm not giving you the scoop. Like,
Right. Yeah,
what do
exactly.
you
Like
mean?
for
Like, that's
what?
my job. Like,
It was
it's
like we're
my
literally in
job.
the same business. Why would I like why would I
It's my
give
job to break the news. Why would I give it to you? Like, so
right.
crazy. And then he somehow finds out that Laura Bravetti's husband does not work for 60 Minutes. He literally just made that up. Like I guess his brother worked for 60 Minutes or something and just kind of like went off of that, but he just was lying
Lying.
about who he was and pumping the prosecutor's side at witnesses for info and then giving it to Laura, his
Which is
wife.
crazy because it's just witness tampering.
Insane.
Like that is
Witness
illegal. Like it's
so
absolutely insane.
illegal.
Like
So
that in and of
illegal.
itself is its own separate trial and crime. Like it is
And
crazy.
it never it that it, they like kind of bring it up because people are like, oh my god, that happens, and the lawyer's like, if it was a real thing, then why didn't it go to trial? And it's like, I
Or why
don't
wasn't
know.
that brought up like during the trial? Like or like
Yeah.
during the cross examinations. He was like, if that was the case, like why didn't anybody say anything? And he was just like,
And it's like, I don't know.
I
Like
don't know.
because that's just so bad, so bad and so
Right.
scary. Again, like it just makes me like never want to talk to anybody about anything. Like it's just so
That's
scary
literally
because
just not
someone's gonna
safe.
use it. Like
Nobody's safe. Nobody's safe.
nobody is safe. And like what like really like made it creepier is that because like there was, all this like hearsay about like her husband pumping everyone for information, Vince releases like this weird statement like via
Mm,
video,
yeah.
which literally the sentence, "My heart goes out to my attorney Laura and her husband Marty," is just wild. My heart goes out to my attorney and you're on trial for
Right.
steroids. My heart goes out to my attorney for keeping me out of jail. Love you, babe. Like
Yeah. Like
the video was so crazy. He basically calls like reporters like dogs. Like he's like,
uh
"Oh, and those reporters who have to eat crow every week for the lies they tell, or just mongrel dogs who da da da." Like it was just a drag.
oh yeah. He was just like
Uh,
pissed and like had the vehicle, so he like went for it, you know?
and he was like, "Is this all you got, gentlemen?"
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Oh,
like
what a way to go while
for the
you're
lot, because he's lying. Like he legit Marty literally did that. Like it's
That's
not
crazy.
up for debate. Like that happened, and for some reason he just got away with it. That
Right.
blew my mind.
That's
Blew my
nuts.
mind. And the biggest question, I guess, that everyone is asking at this point too, because like the trial seems to be falling apart, um, there's no like kind of ground to stand on. And it's like, why did the government bring the trial to Long Island when there was so much evidence? I think the man from the New York Post said this too, is like there was so much evidence right in his backyard in Stamford, Connecticut.
Because
So
that's where the company headquarters are. Like if you're
yes.
gonna get him for doing illegal things for his company and to his employees of his company, why would you not go where the company is based?
It really does not make sense. And I just I don't understand. Again, were they just trying to make an example of him and so they didn't really like think it through? Like I don't really know it.
Yeah,
It
but then
literally
they're now their goal like to win the case, they have to prove that Vince McMahon was essentially like pushing these drugs in New York. Like
right.
to make it, otherwise it's just out of their jurisdiction and the case has to get thrown away anyway. So it's just like it's you made it a much more difficult case to win.
And McDivitt was like, yeah, and it was just the assistant was like, oh, Emily Feinberg was like, oh yeah, like I drove drugs personally to like Hulk Hogan at Nassau Coliseum, and the lawyer was like, we would just bring up Hulk Hogan's schedule and be like, well, he was in, California on
XYZ
that
for that.
day,
Yeah.
so how are you driving him drugs to Nassau Coliseum if he was not even in the state? And he was like, it was just so easy to disprove.
Right.
And I think uh Orezi said this where he was like, it seemed like folly, like why they chose New York. It literally made no sense. There could have pretty much done it anywhere but there, but
Right.
definitely could have done it in Connecticut. It kind of seemed wild.
Right.
Um, and then I guess like they decide to bring in the big guns and they contact Hulk Hogan, the prosecution,
Who is
who's at
now working for a
WCW,
different company. So like he was free to do this.
free to do this, which is insane. And they grant him immunity if he will testify against Vince. And this is wild. Like literally everyone's like when Hulk Hogan walks in, everyone is like jaw on the floor that he actually is there, that he showed up, that he's
Because they
gonna like
did the whole
testify.
rigmarole of getting him out of it the first time.
And
Like,
right. And the fact that like he could be the one that convicts Vince. Like they were so close. They built like this, like you were saying in the beginning, like they built the WWE into what it is, like together,
right,
essentially. Like, and so they were just very close. And like, so he knows the most information. He's the one that they're saying, like, I drove steroids to Hulk Hogan's door. Okay,
right,
like, well, let's get Hulk Hogan in here. It really is so insane, especially because he's such a star
right,
to have him be the last person to
right.
testify. It's like the drama. Like you could not
Oh my
even
God.
write this.
No, like this is uh, like the it's like an actual courtroom drama. Like this is like the people
Literally.
involved, the like the way that it all is like falling apart, like is almost comical. And like
Yeah,
it's just like there's just so many like larger than life entities in this one trial that it's just so like what is like it the circus they wanted, they got.
they got
They got.
having the Hulk Hogan as the Hail Mary is so insane.
Hmm.
And then the craziest part is it's basically Hulk Hogan who exonerates him.
Yeah.
Like that after that, it's like there's no coming back from this. There's just no
Hmm.
coming back from this because Hulk Hogan's like, no, like if like yes, Vince and I did steroids, but it's like if he had some extra, I took him. If I had some extra, I gave them to him, but he never
That doesn't
forced
make
me
him
to
a
do
drug
anything.
dealer.
He didn't sell me any. He didn't knows we were gym buddies. We took, steroids together, but he never forced me to do anything. He never forced anyone else to do anything. He never sold me anything. He never delivered anything to my house. Like literally, he is a witness called by the prosecution and he destroys them. He basically destroys them, but then they have a clip, and I thought this was so interesting. He was on a podcast in like 2002, and they have a clip of him saying like, I wasn't gonna lie. Like what that was the truth. Like there's no reason for me to lie, like and put this man in jail, like when that was the truth.
Uh-huh.
And Vince is free because of me, is literally what he says.
Yeah, which is crazy. And like Vince was like pissed even though it ultimately helped
How?
him.
How could you be? I This is again, that was more of a testament to the type of man that he is than anything else. It's like you may have your differences, but like first of all, there's Hulk didn't necessarily do anything wrong. Like you literally like basically had to edge him out of the WWF and into something else because he was like controversial now because of the steroids or whatever. Like because of like he really didn't do anything wrong and then he exonerates you. Like he could have easily been like, yeah, like Vince dropped off drugs at my house.
Right.
Like he could have and he didn't. And so I'm like, I don't understand like why you're mad at him. It kind
Right.
of makes no sense, especially if you were friends.
Yeah. But they had like had I don't know. I think the point, it was probably more that they had already had such a rift in their relationship that he was just like over him generally. But
Yeah.
it's crazy that like Hulk Hogan is the one that like when all is said and done, like he was like a bit, I'm sure a big reason why this was targeted. And you know, it's that picture of like Hulk, Vincent, like Dr. Zahorian. Like
Mhm.
Hulk's the reason like he's larger than life. He talks about his like 24-inch pythons, blah blah blah. That's his arms. Um
I was like, uh.
yeah, it's his arms. He talks about them all the time. And
Mm.
so like it's crazy that like he is essentially the reason all of this gets like brought on and also the reason it all goes away.
Yeah. That's a great point. He is
Right.
the beginning and the end.
That's nuts.
So wild. So then since he was the last witness and they really have no leg to stand on, O'Shea, I guess, had the most, I would have loved to hear it, the most insane and amazing, life-changing closing argument. Like they were like, he just put his soul on the line and he was so angry and just like
Mhm.
basically painted Vince as this like insane villain.
Who is
And
just like using his wrestlers like and putting them in like dangerous situations all for the sake of like
money,
profit. Right.
which we talked about this like when we were texting and I was like it just makes me wonder like because that had nothing to do with steroids really. Like I guess it does. Like you're
Right.
juicing up your wrestlers and putting them in dangerous situations for money whatever. But I was like it makes me wonder cuz this kind of stuff happens like if the federal government was trying to go after like they knew other things about Vince that they wanted to go after him for but weren't able to
Right.
and this is something they changed the law.
And they could
It's
get
well
into his
known.
business, you
They could
know?
get in. It was well known that the WWF was rampant with steroids and they could get into something because, like, the passion for painting Vince as a villain and saying that, like, he literally is treating human beings like slabs of meat for money and power
Right.
is really interesting to me. Like, and
Right.
also the steroid trial itself, it had really no minimal legs to stand on. So like, why was New York going after him on something that they probably weren't going to get him on? And like, why feel so passionately about it? Like it's just me again, it makes you ask more questions than the
Right.
answers provided because you're like, what was that really the reason or was there something else like that they knew? And now like, knowing Vince as the person he is now, it's like
Right.
what was really going on? Like
Hmm.
it just makes you wonder. It's so
I
scary.
it's nuts because it's just like it, at the end of the day, like he's kind of right. Like
Uh,
it's not like the lawyer who gave the was like incorrect. It just didn't have the like legalities needed to like put him away. I was like, we know
right.
all of this, like this is accurate. Like he does use these people for like, his like to bolster his fame, his money, his company. Like it's not true.
Right.
Like so
And I mean, it plays again, I would love to hear it. And they mentioned that the prosecutor was not like he declined to comment on the
mhm,
trial. And I would have the
ate that
money
up.
I would have paid to
Ate that
hear
up.
his side of it, hear the lawyer from the defending side and the lawyer from the prosecutor side go back and forth in their
Oh,
own little interview. The
I would have ate that
way
up.
like I would have gone
Right.
feral over that. So I wish him all the best. I hope one day he comes forward and starts gabbing. I don't know.
Right.
I'm dying to know. But
Amen.
and you're 100% correct, especially like you said, knowing what we know now. It's not no. Like
Right.
it doesn't really
It's not no.
it's
Like,
not but there's other reasons aside steroids. Like there's so much more. And so I'm like,
right.
what did they know? I just want to know what they know.
And
And
the
like
thing is like
why?
nuts is like he had like nobody else that I know. Okay, so let's say Steroid Trials, what, 1992,
Mm-hmm.
1993?
93.
Owen Hart is what,
9, I
1999?
think.
And then Chris Benoit is 2006. And now this whole thing, like, who has this many, like, just ridiculously, like, major controversial trials? Because the Chris
Mm-hmm.
Benoit thing, like, goes into, like, them not like testing for like head injuries and like all of that
Oh.
like gets
Because
pulled
I
into
know
question.
nothing about that.
Oh,
Because we
do you
haven't
know
met
what
him
happened to
yet.
Chris Benoit? No, you
No,
haven't. Okay.
I
Well,
don't know
that is a
anything.
whole other episode.
Because that's an episode of Dark Side of the Ring, is it
It's
not?
a two-parter.
I saw, okay, so I've like, without like ruining anything for myself, like sometimes I peruse like the other episodes and read, and I'm just like out of curiosity. And I saw that was a two-parter, and I was like, what that's about? But
So
like, we're going to meet him at some point.
yeah, not he doesn't come in for like a while. Currently, like where we are in like the New to Wrestling podcast, he is in WCW. Um,
Oh, okay.
so we're not going to meet him for like a little bit. Um, but yeah, that story is like absolute insanity. He essentially goes. I'll give you like it's not like it happened a long time ago. It's not like new.
Yeah.
It was a big trial.
Hmm.
He essentially goes like nuts one day and murders his wife and and son, and then kills himself. And yeah, and he essentially what it like had boiled down to is that he had, or like what was like ruled, I guess, is that he had so many like brain like traumas to the head over his career, one just being a wrestler generally, but also his like wrestling finisher was a flying headbutt off the top rope, which he performed night in and night out for 20 plus years. So like um he essentially like snaps, does all of that, and then like this ensuing like craziness is like nuts because they do like the WWE does this like they give Chris Benoit like his like send off, like they do like the salute
The
thing
bell.
because they
Yeah.
don't know all of the details of like what's going on, and then effectively they just like erase him from like WWE like history. Like yes, you can go and like watch all of the things that he was like on, but he's never going to be in like a preview picture. He's never like featured in the little like giblet, like little like blurb at the bottom of every episode. Like even if he's the main event of the show, like they never mention him. Like they don't bring him up. He's like he is in like just and rightly so, like just been like
Like
disgraced.
blacklisted. Excommunicado.
Right. And it's like yeah, that's one we'll watch. It's a lot. It's a lot to take because it's so sad. Like
It
because
sounds
his son
sad.
was like he puts his son like in a wrestling hold and like that's how he does it. It's bad.
No.
Yeah, he like
Oh
chokes
my,
him out. It's insane.
oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah, it's
And
terrible.
I don't I don't want to like minimize like somebody's situation by comparing it to like a Greek myth, but do you actually, this is really weird because do you know why Hercules had to do like the trials for Hera?
No.
Like go get like something from the underworld, like do
No, no, no.
and that's what he's most famous for because he was a like kind of gladiator figure who like did all this stuff. Like if you're gonna go off Disney, it's like the montage where he like fights all the monsters, blah blah
Right.
blah. And he was so traumatized from it, he snaps one day and kills Megara, Meg in
Right.
Megara and his children.
Oh wow.
And his punishment is the trials.
That's nuts.
But he literally like he has all this PTSD and head injuries and
Right.
body pain and he literally snaps and kills his whole family.
Yeah, that's what happened. And the thing is like nuts is like he has there's still like a son like surviving who now like he just has to like deal with the knowledge
Oh
that
my
like
God.
yeah, and and like it's crazy because like you'll talk to him and like and I understand like he's like it was his father, like he loved his father, like it's
Of
not
course.
like to but he also knows like what his father did, and it's all
Mm,
but it's also like was that really his father like in that last, you know what I mean, like he has so
yeah.
much to like kind of like
Reckon with.
right, and it's crazy because he looks like the spitting image of his father, like
I just got
copy
chills.
paste, like and like you're just like looking at him and you're just like your life is will never not be in context of this like horrific thing, and like how do you navigate that um is wild, and it's like he feel like I don't know. He feels like his father being erased entirely isn't like necessarily like the solution. Um,
Mm,
but it's just kind of like yeah, I don't know. He has to like reconcile that forever. Is like his father
Wow.
did like this really, really horrible thing to his family, but like you still have to like I don't know, it's hard to be like it's still his father. Like
Yeah. Oh
that's
my
it's you
God.
know what I mean? Like that's crazy. And I think his son actually is on the episode.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God. That is harrowing.
Let's watch it next.
What?
Let's just do it. Yeah.
I'm gonna pass out. I'm gonna be so
It's
scared.
yeah,
Not scared,
we'll
but just like that's a lot.
yeah, we'll do the
Well, it'll have to be a two-parter
yeah, oh for sure.
because
It's 2 episodes, so like it's a lot. It is a lot.
oh my
But
God.
it's worth talking about. Like
Of course. Oh yeah,
yeah,
of course. I mean, that is, and I will save the discussion then for next week, but like that is,
wild.
I can't imagine being that kid.
No.
Wow. Um,
Where are
well,
we?
circling back to the episode we're actually watching.
Right.
So O'Shea just made his like insane speech, and McDivitt talks about how Stephanie, who is Vince's son. So I
Daughter.
think this is daughter. Oh my God, sorry.
It's
I
okay.
I because I was thinking ahead of like, so the daughter and the son are both there. So both of Vince's kids are there for the whole trial, and apparently it really takes a toll on both of them, especially Stephanie. And like the prosecutor painting Vince as this like insane maniacal villain, blah blah blah, like I guess really upsets her, and she is in the hallway like crying. And this is the only time we see the lawyer show any type of emotion. Like he doesn't necessarily like cry, but he has this like, and I have to tell you, I liked the lawyer. This felt fake to me. Did it, how did it feel for you? Because I felt kind of like a YouTube apology video where it's like they look like they're crying and they're not.
Right. Yeah. It's just
I
like
couldn't tell
I don't know if he's capable of feeling the
a
emotions
feeling.
that he is describing. Like
Yeah,
if
and he
I'm
was
being
like,
honest,
and he's
like
gonna like sue me for defamation, but it's whatever.
he better not, we're gonna lose.
Yeah, no, I'll fully lose, even if whatever. I'm sorry, like alleged. So, he says that he gets like emotional, says, I always liked Stephanie, and this was like really hard on her. And I just said to her, Stephanie, you haven't heard my say yet, so just hold on.
Right.
And this is his closing statement. Basically calls the poor regulations that the government has basically, I was gonna say put into place, but really has not, about anabolic steroids, and saying that it's basically hypocrisy. The fact that you have no regulations on this drug that you're saying is illegal. You've been presented with paperwork that says the FDA is saying, please pull this from the market. It is unsafe for human consumption,
And
and you
it's
haven't.
right.
It's still on the market. And it's funny, he says the jury, I guess, wrote a note to the judge asking if that was true. They have to like recess and like go into the judge's chambers, and like it is true, and have to discuss like, it's true, do we want them to know this information? And basically they get to a point where it's like they have to know this information, like it's
Right.
important. So it's true that this steroid, proven to be dangerous, has not been taken off the market from federal regulation. And so it makes no sense. Like it's
Why?
hypocrisy to like judge these people for using steroids when you're not even regulating what you're,
What you're
prosecuting them
pushing.
for.
Yeah. Like
Yes. Like you're reaping what you sow at this point. It's like if you are not denying them access, then they're going to access it. Like it just whatever.
right.
But the lawyer says that, and this is crazy, for a federal trial, it is like it's 90% end in a guilty verdict or a plea bargain. And you can also count on one hand how many times there's been an acquittal or a not guilty verdict without calling witnesses. And I didn't even think
Think
of that.
about
Like,
it. No, not until he said it at the end. I was like, oh, he didn't call anybody. He didn't
he
call
didn't
anybody.
call a single witness. And it's so crazy how all the prosecutor's witnesses basically told on themselves and ended up working for the defense anyway, sort of like inadvertently. So it's like,
Right.
and they're like, why did you not call Vince to the stand? He's like, I felt no reason to. He had nothing. There was no
What was
reason
he
to
gonna
question.
say?
What
Like
was he gonna say? And
he's
they,
like
and it's just like using. calling no witnesses, basically relying on the fact that the prosecutor's witnesses have nothing,
Right.
is like he said, he goes, it's
It's
a
the
crazy
confidence.
gamble.
Yeah, he's like, it is. Yeah, he said it. He's like, it's such a risk because like I'm essentially just banking on the fact that their argument's gonna fall apart. Like,
Yeah. And
and,
he goes,
and
and if they lose, it's like this idiot didn't even call one witness to help defend this guy. But if you win, it's like, man, he did it without even calling a witness. Because
right.
it's a crazy risk.
Yeah.
I would pass out. He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not calling any witnesses. I'd be like,
You're not
what?
gonna. Nobody's gonna defend me.
Nobody's
Nobody.
coming? Nobody? Crazy. Um, but first Vince is acquitted of all charges,
Yeah.
and then the WWE is acquitted of all charges.
Right. Nuts.
Everything thrown away.
Yeah, and apparently, like people were like clapping, like
Cheering. I just they and he pointed out the picture, the like the drawing, the courtroom drawing
yeah,
of like Linda, Vince, and him hugging and like they're all clapping. It is kind of weird. It gives like kind of like throuple energy, like a little bit. Like he's like, our
yeah,
bond is unbreakable. Look
yeah.
at us.
Vince wishes, I'm sure.
Vince, swear to God, he really does. Ew. Um, yeah. And apparently he says he goes, the jury verdict was very popular. The whole courtroom like cheered, erupted, so happy, la la la. And this got me when they go out to celebrate after winning.
Mm.
McDivitt is like, oh, Vince, like he goes, I was joking. I was like, oh yeah, like Vince, now haha, we're not playing anymore. You could take your neck brace off. And Vince takes his neck brace off and like swings it around and like
And like
celebrates.
victory, yeah. What
And
a
he goes, I
move.
don't, he goes, he put it on, he put it back on right after, blah, 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 blah. And we're like, girl, stop lying.
No, I was like, mm-mm. And like the long and short of it is crazy because essentially it was proved that like everybody was on steroids. Like at the end of the day, like, and that's what we're talking about in the beginning, where it's just like, yes, like the government definitely was like coming after like the W to make an example, but it's also like they were all on
They
steroids.
were the example. This is what we were talking about when Xavier and I were texting. I was like, this is the gag. The
Right.
gag is everyone admitted they were on steroids and everyone
Fully.
gets so wrapped up in the circus of the trial. They like, it's like they don't even care. That suddenly you found out every wrestler, Hulk Hogan, every Ultimate Warrior, every wrestler you've ever known and loved has done steroids. And it's like, not a big deal.
Not a big
Because
deal.
like you're just so focused on the trial. Like I was like, Hulk Hogan went on the stand and said, yeah, me and Vince did steroids every day, la la la, like
Together.
traded them back and
Like
forth together, went to the gym. And everyone was like, wow, then Hulk exonerates Vince. I'm like, what did he just say? Like
right.
suddenly no one cares. Like it
Right.
real that is the gag of it
That is the
all.
gap. Like that is the real like victory here. It's like they went through this entire trial, and at the end of it, like it was everything other than like Vince like pushing, like literally being the one pushing drugs was found to be accurate. This like crooked doctor was out here just like handing out steroids like candy to everybody. They were all taking it, they were all sharing it, in addition to what Lord knows what other drugs they were purchasing from this man because they had them. And like
Mm-hmm.
it was just bandied about that like this was correct and it was around and it was prevalent and like it was proven and like through multiple wrestlers being like, yeah, no, like we were all like 100% doing that. Yeah. And it's just like, and at the end of the day, like it doesn't even matter.
Didn't even matter. And that's again why what we're saying, like, I don't think Hulk Hogan had to lie. Because in
I
the end, he didn't, and it didn't matter. And
And
yes, he
it
was
didn't
at the,
matter.
in a different place in his career at that point.
Right.
But still, like the trajectory of the perspective from this episode, that again, that's why I watched it twice. Because I was like, there's just so many things to process here. Like how the beginning is basically like a witch hunt for like the wrestlers are doing steroids, like that's wrong and la la la. And then it's just suddenly like, woohoo, Vince is free, celebrate good
Right.
times,
Honestly,
come on. And I was like,
what?
what?
No. And that's what's like crazy. It's just like it's that it was all true essentially, but it just like legally didn't fall into place. So they won. And it's just like what? What?
It's so wild. And again, I'm not judging them for doing steroids. What's his name? B something Blair, Killer
Brian?
Bees man. Thank you. Triple B. He
Yep.
said
Bye-bye.
he was like, oh my God, I totally lost my train of thought. It doesn't matter. I forget what I was gonna say.
Okay.
But
All good, all good.
yeah, I just
Insanity. Just nuts.
oh, I was saying I don't think that I don't blame them for doing steroids. It
No.
just oh, he said that, thank you, I found it. He was like, you have no idea the pressure you're under. Like you're just under the most insane amount of pressure. Like you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you have to do this thing to like be able to perform or whatever. So like again, I don't blame them, especially it was legal. It started out. I'm sure there's probably still people that dabble, like without a
Right.
doubt.
Oh, for sure.
And I don't necessarily blame them, and I don't like necessarily want to see them suffer because of choices they made that were probably like again, they're human beings.
Right.
But oh
It's just
God,
nuts.
like
Like
it is
this whole
crazy.
thing was just like a ride from
A
the jump.
ride. Oh my God. Like shocking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not over the husband. Like I just
Though out here just like pretending he's on 60 minutes and whatnot, like lying. Like I want to know, I want to hear from the assistant, I want to hear from the driver, I want to hear from this husband, I want
yep.
to hear from the other lawyer. I was like,
I'm dying to hear from that other lawyer.
I
O'Shea, sweetie,
wherever you are,
where are
we'll
you?
have you on. We can talk about it.
I would that would be crazy. I there would be no shortage of that would be like a 3 hour episode because I would just pick his brain apart.
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Everything. Oh, I just realized you're wearing your Hercules sweatshirt. Didn't even make that
Oh
connection when I said
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, any like final thoughts like other
I,
than like my brain is soup now and I'll
no,
never be
literally.
able to sleep again?
It's just like this victory, it does kind of like it informs, or at least in my mind, a lot of the how do I guess perceived immunity that Vince believes that he has. Uh
Yes, that is so
because
true.
if you can go through an entire like 2 year plus trial, um where essentially you were guilty of most of what they are saying and still get off is pretty it'll give you a complex. Like I'm
He
not
is
like
yeah. It's a god complex that is pretty severe. Especially like if that's your lawyer and he literally is saying you have an unbreakable bond. All right, well, let's test it. Like he's literally like, let me see how far I can take it.
and clearly he has.
He has taken it to a limit I did not even know exist. The limit does not exist apparently with the disgusting
No,
things Vince is
no,
capable of.
there is no level too low for Vince McMahon,
God,
apparently.
he really
So
is a gutter rat. Yeah, this was such a crazy ride. We highly encourage you to watch the episode if you haven't. Um, but yeah, so I guess next week we're gonna get into
part
something
one of the Chris Benoit double
very
feature.
dark.
It's gonna be very dark, but
It's gonna be dark. We'll approach it as tenderly as possible,
obviously,
and
yes,
we'll get through it
well,
together.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so that's been another episode of the New to Wrestling podcast After Dark. Thank you so much if you checked into both shows this week. On the New to Wrestling podcast this week, we saw the fallout of the Final Four
Y'all,
pay-per-view of 1997.
I'll never
And
recover from what happened, by the way, on that
it was
episode.
crazy. We are leading up. We are on the road to WrestleMania. Leading up to WrestleMania. I think it's 13. I think it's 13. Um,
I think you're right.
yeah, and it's getting wild. There are a few big matches on that card that I'm super looking forward to. So kind of seeing the build up to that is exciting. And thank you all for the like feedback responses to this new show, and you
Mm-hmm.
guys have been really engaging with it and commenting, and we live for it, so thank you. If you do comment and we haven't gotten back to you yet, it's only because we have full-time jobs that we do
Aside from this, yeah.
aside from this. So we will get to you as soon as we can.
Hmm.
But we appreciate you taking the time, always, always, always. So
Yeah.
yeah, any other closing thoughts?
No, same reflections of just like thank you so much for the comments, the discourse, the chats, the memes, literally everything. We love it, appreciate it, and we hope to hear more from you. Please, if you guys watch this episode, please drop your thoughts. I'm so
Oh,
curious. Do
please.
we
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
government conspiracy? Do we think it's just
Because there was a lot. We left
everything?
this episode with a lot of questions still.
Yeah, and
So
like
like
I'm chomping at the bit to discuss. So please let us know
100%.
your thoughts. But thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
This was a goodie.
This was a
This was a
goodie.
goodie, girl.
All right, guys. We will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.